Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So this is the first in a few discussions about just game-related topics that I plan on doing over the coming few days and weeks, and it's going to be about flying, because flying is a really big issue, or at least a very interesting issue, and there was a lot of chatter going on about it leading up to the launch of the expansion. Now that we're coming up to patch 6.2, I think it's about time that we roughly talked about this, because back during the beta and all that stuff, Blizzard said that they would consider re-adding flying into the game for patch 6.1, but then of course when 6.1 came out, they said that they would keep no flying because, well, the world of Draenor was still the current content, which I guess makes a lot of sense because, yeah, 6.1's new world content, while it wasn't really of a vast quantity, was actually located in the world. 6.2, though, changes that quite a bit, with all of the new content being either inside the garrison, queued, or in Tanaan Jungle. So that begs the question, is it time to bring flying back into the game? Well, in short, yeah, I think it is. Personally, I don't mind either way, and I think being on a ground mount has never really caused much of an issue for me, but flying won't actually take away from patch 6.2's content, and for many people, it's going to bring a bit of fresh life back into Draenor. I think there's a lot of kind of random little tasks, achievements, and things like that people maybe haven't been bothered with, and if flying is added, then for some of those people who wouldn't have done that world content anyway, well, maybe they'll give it a shot, and that could sort of encourage a bit more gameplay from some, which I suppose is definitely a bonus. Now, what flying would do, of course, is, yeah, would trivialize the world content of patch 6.0 and patch 6.1, but really, when we go over it all, is that much of a loss? I don't think so, and plus, people who were most interested in that content, and people who will maybe have got the most out of it, have probably done it anyway. Let's just go through the content quickly though. So first of all, yeah, treasures would be completely trivialized. Any traversal or anything like that that's involved in getting a trevor? No, getting a treasure would be gone, and you could just load up a map and go from node to node picking them up. But that doesn't really matter because they were mainly a thing for leveling only. Now, rare mobs would be trivial, but again, they don't provide like any challenge at all at the minute with half-decent gear that's super easy to get, so them being a bit more trivial, it's not really much of a loss, honestly. Other than that, there isn't really much. Apex's missions would be kind of odd. For some of them, grinding mobs would still be optimal, so people would still do that. But yeah, for others, I'd say people would just end up flying from clickable object to clickable object. And I guess that kind of sucks, but I don't think Apex's missions are that ruinable at this stage, if I'm completely honest with you. Now, I suppose the Nagrand rare hunting would change quite a bit, and you'd see less people farming there for, say, Savage Bloods and things like that, but again, that stuff's going to be less relevant in patch 6.2, because the new equivalent of Savage Bloods, which is called Fell Blight, or Fell something, I believe, is just gathered off, like, mining nodes, skinning, and herbalism in 6.2 inside Tanaan Jungle, so that's not much of a loss, honestly. The main benefit to no flying in Warlords of Draenor, I think, was actually seen during the leveling content, which is kind of funny because most expansions have had disabled flying while leveling anyway, so was it much of a change? No, I honestly think that it was a bit of a squandered opportunity, and that will be something that I'll cover in the second half of this video. Anyway, so overall, I'd say that it just is a bit of a win-win situation adding flying back into the game. It would make some people happy, and it wouldn't have much of an overall effect on people's gameplay anyway. We're all going to be chilling out in Tanaan Jungle, doing things there on the ground, so the current content of the game won't involve flying. I'd say if Blizzard were to announce this, they should probably do it via a blog post, so that they can just say, you know, we're adding flying back in, the current content is in a single zone, so there'll be no flying there, and our overall philosophy is that in the current content there should be no flying. That way, they'd still be on message, and they wouldn't lose much face over the whole thing. Now, coming from the perspective of someone who is completely pro no flying, I don't see this as doing a 180. I think it makes the most sense when the world content is the current content. When that changes, doesn't make that much sense, and given the world content of Draenor, yeah, I think it's okay to have flying back in. It was a good experiment, and I'll come to some more conclusions after I talk about how I actually thought the whole thing panned out. So first of all, I think it was a squandered opportunity to a pretty ridiculous degree. They could have done so much more with the idea of players being grounded, and yeah, while they didn't necessarily ruin anything or make anything terrible, again, squandered opportunity. So first of all, the good Draenor world content, i.e. the leveling, the treasures, and the rares, were essentially all leveling content, so no flying was actually a given in that case. Whether you could fly at level 100 or not was not really an issue. At max level, the Apexis missions weren't really that effective, and World PvP pretty much only took place in Ashran, so there would be no flying anyway. The lack of proper rep and quest hubs kind of kills World PvP, and I can't see the PvP fans being too much into Apexis missions, so again, I can't really see it affecting them too much. Other than that, so much of this expansion's content was centered around the garrison, something which I will go depth into in a future video, but suffice to say, like, the endgame experience was hardly focused in the world of Draenor outside of maybe the first 2 hours, where you might want to head out and do one or two things in the ground to get some basic gear so you can get into normal dungeons or LFR, but you can just buy that gear off the AH anyway, so it doesn't seem like there's really much of a reason to go out into the world unless you want to hunt for a toy or do a rep. So I suppose they set up a situation with no flying where they could have done so much, but ultimately they didn't really do enough with it. First of all, let's talk about World PvP. I think it could have been way better fostered, and I remember back during the Burning Crusade hearing loads of players complaining that flying meant zero World PvP because you wouldn't really knock into people while you were running around the place in the world, and it would seem that, yeah, that was the case. Now, putting PvP objectives in the zones of Draenor that came with rewards that people actually cared about would have really paired up well with the fact that people were grounded. You would give PvP interested players a reason to be in the world, and you would also ensure that they didn't just fly on top of each other or fly away from each other. It would have fostered PvP in the actual world. And in terms of things, you would have zone-wide bonuses, obviously, the regular thing that they do, but also some sort of reward system. I don't know if that would mean you would get some sort of currency for completing Draenor World PvP, maybe that could play into a transmog vendor or some bits of unique gear. Lots of different things could happen, honestly, but I think it is a bit of a wasted opportunity because seeing some of those zone-wide objectives would have been great. Back in TBC, they had the world objectives in, but they added flying, which meant that they didn't really happen as much. In Draenor, they could have just had the best of both worlds. No flying and PvP objectives in the world, meaning that people maybe would have actually participated in them. I just think it was a bit of a wasted opportunity, especially since this was supposed to be a bit of an experiment. Well, that really is something that I think they should have experimented with. Also, at max level, they could have done more with treasures and discoverable items. Yeah, some of the treasures are great to go at, when you're level 100 for transmog or toys, but most of the ones don't really matter for a level 100 character because they're all about leveling. So, more treasures for level 100 characters, or designed with level 100 characters in mind, would have been great. Hell, you could even do, say, a treasure hunting event within zones, or perhaps something like that, as a part of a sort of Stranglethorn Vale fishing competition-esque thing. You maybe could have done more traversal challenges, and then just had more max-level treasures. Okay, probably not gear, but just stuff that's designed around the max-level player. They could have done a lot, because in the past with the game, they've done some really decently interesting things with treasures that got you out looking for stuff, so that could have been nice. Another thing that I think they really should have done, and this applies to Tanaan Jungle as well, is world events. Come on, Iron Horde patrols, supply caravans, raiding parties, or mini-bosses could maybe pop up in the world similar to how it was handled in patch 5.3. Then what you would have is groups of players who are all, of course, on the ground, riding into battle together and facing these problems. In 5.3, all that happened is people just dive-bombed on the problem, but in Draenor, if you're all on the ground, you've got a big objective or, zone-wide objective to go to, then it brings together the people of that zone. And that could have worked really well. I remember back in Guild Wars 2, actually, whenever a zone objective or a zone event, whatever they were called, would happen, you would be running around the place, you'd meet other players, and you'd all bump into each other, and then you'd go and cooperatively deal with an event. And that was one of the coolest things, for me anyway, about Guild Wars 2. I'd say they could have fostered something like that in WoW if they tried. Also, I'd say that if reps were a bit more than just a mob grind, then it would have actually got people out into the world doing something. And if they were doing something that was maybe quest-based, I think it would benefit a lot more from the grounded gameplay. Specifically, if reps involved questing and things like that, then Blizzard could design quests with the knowledge that people would be experiencing from the ground, so maybe they could have done some cool things with traversal, or maybe, the odd jumping puzzle, who knows, but they could have done something with that. But unfortunately, the reps just ended up being a bit of a mob grind. honestly, I don't think that Blizzard thought that that mob grind stuff was a good idea. I think it was just one of the realities of perhaps the problematic kind of production issues that surrounded WoD. Maybe in a better world, or perhaps in the next expansion when they have less issues, and hopefully when that team size, increases, all settled down, then they'll be able to do some cool stuff with that. I could probably go on for a while longer giving suggestions, but overall the point is that no flying could have turned out to be far better and more interesting in terms of direct player experience if Blizzard just had more world content. If the next expansion were to feature a focus on the world content rather than, say, garrison or queued content, then I would be all for restricted flying until a major patch comes out that supplants the main, the expansion's main sort of set of zones as world content. I think it was a good experiment and one that was for the best in Warlords of Draenor, so overall a good call from Blizzard, but they just could have done a little bit more with it. And I guess that's maybe a little bit frustrating, and honestly it doesn't seem like patch 6.2 is going to change the situation with flying, so if you weren't really pro-flying, then I don't know if there'll be much here for you. I haven't seen any reference to it actually happening as of yet with 6.2, so it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Now that said, the world of Draenor is built with flying as a possibility. One of the tools that I use for the lore videos is actually a machinima camera that lets you sort of fly your camera around the place, and hell, even using things like Aviana's Feather, you can see that all the world geometry and all that stuff, it's made, it's textured, it's lit, it all makes sense, it exists, so it's not a technical issue, it's really just an issue of, do Blizzard sort of enable that flag that allows people to fly? So, we don't know right now, it could change during the PTR, we'll have to wait and see, but what I'm really interested in is what you all think, because, believe it or not, I do actually read the comments. I've noticed as of late that the comments of the videos are really good, and it's kind of heartening, especially, I think the most recent discussion video that I did, I've actually forgotten off the top of my head what it's on. Yeah, the one about dailies. There's actually great discussions going on there. Never have I seen a YouTube comment section so full of wordy posts and people actually having a chat about things. It was pretty awesome. So if you're interested, leave a comment down there, drop a like on that like button if you found the video interesting. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.